gentleman he provides executive leadership to the overseas operations, US operations, and human resource divisions. His role is to enhance performance, stimulate innovation, and position the agency for the future. In 2015, he was elected the first Vice President of Caritas Internationalis, a confederation of 165 Catholic relief, development, and social organizations operating in over 200 countries and territories worldwide. From 2004 to 2012, Sean was CRS Executive Vice President for Overseas Operations, providing oversight for and management portfolio, which grew to over $8,000 million, serving people in 100 countries and engaging a team of over 4,500 staff. As the Regional Director for South Asia from 1998 to 2004, Sean strengthened CRS programming and partnership in India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and Nepal, leading the regional response to floods, droughts, earthquakes, cyclones, and man-made emergencies. Prior to his assignment to South Asia, Sean served as a Director of Human Resources for Catholic Relief Service at its world headquarters in Baltimore, as a Director of the CRS Nicaragua program, and worked in Central America and headquarters in various capacities. Sean holds a Bachelor of Arts in Spanish from Tufts University, Magnum Cum Laude, and Master of Arts in Law and Diplomacy from the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University. Let me welcome our Chief Operating Officer, Sean.
Karibu, or welcome to you all. Jumbo. When I came in last night on the flight with several other people here, some people said, wow, I don't have to present till Tuesday. And they said, when do you present? And I said, first thing tomorrow morning. And they said, oh boy, that's gonna be tough. And I said, you know, not really, because I'm actually pretty excited. And they said, you know, what are you excited about? And I thought, you know, here we have an opportunity to meet with over 750 different people from around the world. And we have an opportunity to touch people in 70 different countries that are being represented here from over 300 governments and different organizations. And as we were thinking, as I was thinking about it, you know, why are we here? And I think it's because we have a big group of people that are basically mad. And what I mean by that is a friend of mine who's recently passed away said, people who work in this business are making a difference. And right now, the development field and the public sector field is being vilified a little bit for not doing enough and not reaching out. And I actually disagree with that. I think we've done a heck of a lot of good. But the reason why each and every one of you are here is we can do a lot more good. And we can do a lot more good if we do it together. This map here shows that this is the 7th conference that we've had, and it's grown each time. And the reason why it's grown is we all know that in order to make a difference, in order to help the people in this world, we need to work together. It doesn't matter which organization, which country, what religion we are, we need to do it as one. And those of us in this room are idealistic enough to think that we can do it, that we can make a difference. We also have people from these different 70 countries, so people from around the world that are coming. So we know that our reach is out there, and we're going to continue to reach. So I hope that during this week, you'll take the opportunity not to stay with the people you came with and the people that you know, but you'll reach out to others from other countries, other regions, so that we can learn from each other. The whole idea here is to share different experiences. I also want to thank our organizing partners and our sponsors. These are the organizations and the people that work for them that are setting the context, that are creating the environment so that we can flourish in this field, that we can reach out, that we can do something that makes a difference. I'd also just like to recognize someone who was somewhat of the founder and the inspiration for these type of sessions and bringing us all together. Many of you know Carol Bothwell, who had worked for CRS, and she kind of inspired us in this. Unfortunately, a few weeks ago, she had a pulmonary embolism, which was diagnosed. She's been released from the hospital, but of course she cannot fly at this time. So she is going to be sitting on her computer, waiting for the updates and the tweets and things to see if we're going to leverage technology for the social good. And I can guarantee you, if anyone here knows Carol, she won't be resting at her bed. She'll be watching everything that we do. You have in your books and packets, you have the agenda and the list of where we are. You can also download the app so that you can see it on your phones and all as you get around. So please look at anyone with an orange shirt around. They can help direct you to different places. But we want to make sure that you get out there, that you're getting to the programs that you want to get to, and that you have a great opportunity of doing that. I wanted to talk a little bit about, again, why we're here. And one of the reasons that we're here is currently, right now in Ethiopia, there are 10 million people who are hungry. 10 million people that don't have adequate food today. A couple weeks ago, I went to Nigeria, and we were looking at our programs in Nigeria and what we could do there. And in Nigeria, we have a relatively big program, and we're reaching 1.2 million people. And we thought, that's pretty good, isn't it? Reaching 1.2 million people. When I tell our board of directors that we reach 100 million people, every year, I say, when you wake up in the morning, do you think about that you're touching the lives of 100 million people? But my colleagues in Nigeria said, we're only scratching the surface. There's 122 million people in Nigeria that earn less than $2 a day. We're reaching 1.2. We have to do more. It's not satisfactory. We currently have 60 million people moving around this world from country to country. 60 million people without a home right now. None of us is satisfied with that. Those of us in this room have to think about what we can do to scale up our interventions, what we can do to make sure that our interventions are sustainable, what we can do to build that local resistance. Now is the time for us to be creative. Now is the time for us to be the innovators. Now is the time for us to show the impact of what we do on a scale that we've never seen before. So let's make sure that these women here are receiving the health care that they need, or the options for a stronger livelihood. Let's make sure that the sustainable development goals are met. These sustainable development goals were done a little differently this time. Many countries participated, and everyone said, there's too much out there. There's too much participation. That's kind of like there's too much democracy, No, people put out there what they thought they needed. And so now we have a long list. And what does that mean? We have to figure out how we connect that list together. What are the elements that work together, and how can we do it? We need to make sure that the people who need the services get the services that they need. Whether it be poverty alleviation, whether it be regarding the climate, whether it is in agriculture or gender equity. Many of these areas we need to work together and build peace and strengthen our different interactions. As we do it, we can take from, in all of your bags you have what we have, the SDG ICT Playbook that shows starting a pathway of how we can move forward. But I see today kind of like I did when, a couple weeks ago, my 11-year-old son had something that they call an adjudication. He plays the cello, and he and 10 of his friends went to this adjudication where judges rate you. And this was the first time he was going to do it. And he had to play a solo, and he had to do a duet, and then he got together with 9 of his colleagues, and they were going to play together. And they went there, and the kids were all a little bit nervous, but not too nervous. He's 11 years old, and I don't think they really knew what they were getting into. They were all dressed nice and black and white, you know, and looking straight. And as they came into the room, they sat down there, and they didn't have a teacher with them. They had the evaluator sitting at the table, so they were a little nervous about that, and they kind of wondered what to do, and she nodded and said, "Are you going to tune up?" And so they tuned up their instruments. They then looked at each other and said, "Let's play." And they played together, and they did a great job. And these are kids, some, you know, who, like my son, who rents his cello, and some who haven't played quite enough, and others, you know, and they played together, and some of the parents had snuck in the side of the room, and we were listening, and they did a pretty good job. We thought, well, that's nice. This is a good experience for the kids. Then the evaluator said to them, "You know, you did very well. I liked the way the cello held the melody there. I liked the way the violins came in and the violas and the bass. You really stood up there and did a good job." And the kids felt good about that. You know, they all said, "Wow, this is nice. We're getting a professional telling us what we're doing. We feel like professionals, like we're really making a difference out here with our music." And then the person asked them and said, "You know, in this piece of music, why is it played like this? Why do they have these notes that go up and down?" And one of the kids raised their hand and said, "Because it's dramatic." And they said, and then she said to them, "How do you make it dramatic?" And a couple of the kids said, "You play faster, or you play stronger, or you do it a little bit different." And she said, that's right. "And how do you do that while you're playing together?" And they said, "Okay, well, we look at each other and we see the movement, and we close our eyes a little bit and we feel the music." You know, as I was listening to them, that was the story. It really was feeling the music and being a little bit different and innovative. It's about making sure that these people have a better life. And that's why we all came here. That's why some of you might be a little bit jet lagged and you come in, but we're here for these people. There's different ways we can go about doing it, and we do it in different ways. Whether it be disaster relief, agriculture, livelihoods, education, water, environment, governance, human rights, and health. All of these sectors you know about, and we can all do them differently. But see how all those arrows move in together? Let's not stovepipe them. Let's not keep them separate. Let's make sure we unify our approaches. Because you can't do agriculture if you're not healthy, and you can't study if you don't have the resources and can't buy the books. And if you don't have water, you're going to get sick. And if we don't have peace in this world, we're going to get nowhere. So we have to ensure that we bring them all together with an integral approach. We've got some new innovations out there, and many of you have been involved in them, whether it be with connectivity, with digital services, with analytics, or 3D printing. They're all out there. We need to maximize the usage and figure out how not just the people in this room can use these services, but the people that we serve and the people that we work with. It must be that ICT for development also means ITC for the participants in our program, that they're the ones that are driving it, that they're the ones that can use it, and they're the ones that benefit from it. We do have many challenges as we look forward. Is it affordable, the access? We have to change behavior. We all know how difficult that is. Building local capacity. Let me just tell you, the most exciting thing for me over the last 20 years that I've been working in this business has been the capacity. When I come to these countries and I see the capacity development that they've had, it's astonishing. And I actually don't call it capacity development that much. I really call it credentialization. And what I mean by that is, finally, the people in many of the countries in which we work, in this whole continent, are now being recognized for the dynamism, intelligence, and creativity they have, because they now have the credentials of various degrees. They always had the intelligence. They always knew which way to move forward. They now have the degrees so that others are respecting them for it. But that capacity development is moving so fast forward, and we can see it in this room. we need to make sure that we don't stifle that and that we enrich it. Sustainable business models, privacy and security, gender equity, these are all the challenges that we must face, so we need to unite them along with uniting the approaches that we saw in the previous slide. We also want to make sure that you are participants and not recipients of this conference. We want to make sure that each one of you participates, reaches out, raises questions, and will come back at the end of the week to come together to find out where we go forward. This should be the launching pad on where we go after the conference. This is not the end. This is not something we just listen to and say, wasn't that great, and we go home. This needs to be the beginning of our journey. I want to finally just thank again those who have supported us throughout. Thank Carol Bothwell, who isn't here right now, and thank all of you who have taken the time to come here because you believe we can make a difference. You believe with the Sustainable Development Goals that all of us together can help the people throughout the world have a better life. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean, for kicking us off so very well. Inspirational stories. Never a better story than to relate the story of a child growing into a new skill. And I'd like to also reference some of the points he made about access, connectivity, and building local capacity. And I think you'll see as this conference unfolds during the week that that's really the essence of what the theme is about. Innovation to action, but using ICTs in capacity building, empowering people through connectivity, and joining the internet and information society. You know, 2015 was an amazing year for development, as you well appreciate. The Addis Ababa Action Agenda focused on financing for development with a systematic treatment of science, technology, and innovation and information technologies. The COP21, the Conference of the Parties on Climate, concluded in December and called to arms all nations to really pay attention to the climate as never before. Of course, the WSIS plus 10, this is the World Summit on Information Society. 10 years out, what did we accomplish during the MGG period, the Millennium Development Goals? And then, of course, in September, the Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Development Agenda, which is a fantastic aspirational agenda, laying out for us a blueprint for change into the future. I want to also compliment Catholic Relief Services, Net Hope, and the others who put together this playbook in the short expanse of 3 months, really, since the May 2015 conference, this conference in Chicago, and before the SDGs were released in September. And on the day the SDGs were released in September, 192 nations signed on to them. This document was available. It is a document for practitioners, but it's also a document for leadership, for our leaders all the way to the top, to our presidents, to understand what this agenda is about and how information and communication technologies are indispensable as enablers for development. Our next speaker is uniquely qualified to address this. Dr. Mukhisa Kituyi, Secretary General of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, located in Geneva. Dr. Kituyi is a man of Kenya, which is even more important that we have him here today. He became the 7th Secretary General of UNCTAD on September 1st, 2013. And you will know he has an extensive background across a span of academic, research, government careers. He was born in Bungoma District, Western Kenya. He studied political science and international relations at the University of Nairobi and at Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda, receiving a BA in 1982, and he went on to earn a Master's of Philosophy and PhD from the University of Bergen in Norway. Throughout his career, he has served in various capacities that is so relevant to his current responsibilities as UNCTAD Secretary General, including the African Center for Technology Studies in Nairobi. He served in Parliament in 1992 and was twice re-elected. He was Kenya's Minister of Trade and Industry from 2002 to 2007. And throughout this distinguished career, he has enhanced his reputation as a visionary in economic and trade policy, particularly for Africa and African nations, through many various capacities. Most recently, Dr. Kituyi was Chief Executive of the Kenya Institute of Governance, based here in Nairobi. And I'm pleased to say during 2012, he has served as a non-resident fellow of the African Growth Initiative of the Brookings Institution in Washington, D.C., and was a resident scholar there in 2011. So it was with great pleasure that I'm given this opportunity to introduce our friend, the Secretary General.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to bid you welcome to my country. I was glad that your meeting here coincided with my trip in the region between the World Economic Forum for Africa in Kigali and some activities I'm having in Nairobi as part of preparations for a major conference I'm having in July. When I was invited to come to you, I thought it was interesting because it allowed me an opportunity not to pretend to be very clever, but to think aloud about some of the challenges that we're grappling with, partly and to a large extent because of the success of the digital revolution, because of the slow international appreciation and policy synergies between what ICT has to offer and what governments and other institutions of governance are doing. I just want to think aloud about 2-3 different things. And where do I come from? I come from a number of different angles. One, until 2 weeks ago, I was the chair of the United Nations Group on Internet Governance, the UNCTAD system, which I passed on to the head of ITU in absentia because I was on mission. 2, we have been major institutional players in the WUSIS process, including I presented the WUSIS report to the General Assembly last December as part of the assessment and then stock taking to take strategic positions on the next 10 years. 3rd, I host the Secretariat of the United Nations Commission on Science and Technology for Development, which he chaired at one time, which is a system-wide initiative on ICT and technology governance within the UN family. And finally, I'm hosting a conference in Nairobi in July at which we're trying to launch a major initiative aligning international trade facilitation with with e-trade, or what we call e-trade, e-commerce for development. Now I'll come back to that briefly. One of the things that we've been consumed with over the past few weeks is how do we deal with the challenges? How do we identify and deal with the challenges for spreading access to the digital economy? First of all is to define what are the challenges, what are the issues, the hurdles. Secondly, what have been the weaknesses in application? And then what are the risks that we encounter as we try to deal with this? A number of things are important. It's too late in the day to try to say why it is important that we spread out the internet, that there's a broadband inclusion, that there is computer literacy at the most basic levels. And I'm glad that in this country, well above African and developing country average, the embrace of this of ICT is fairly commendable. But still, it is held back by a lot of challenges. Across the board, internet penetration remains extremely minimal in the developing world. We published, at UNCTAD every year we publish the World Information Economy Report. And in our assessments, we have a number of startling statistics like internet coverage in the developing world is at 6.7% compared to 81.3% in the developed world. 3G technology coverage shows, of course, massive coverage, but a distinct divide between urban and rural areas, with 29% coverage in rural areas across the board and 89% in urban areas. Broadband is even more acute, that in the developing world, fixed broadband is only 1% coverage. In some of the more emergent African countries, it is slightly improved to 3%, but mobile broadband is slightly better at 17%, but compared with 85% in the developed world. This poses a number of things, apart from just the fiscal reality that those who are online remain a pitiable minority in the countries where we deal with the challenges of poverty, but also that even of those who are online, there's phenomenal underutilization of the potential of the broadband access that they have. So how do we expand access, and how do we optimize the use of the access that they have? Kenya has been seeing some efforts to improve our e-commerce through, for example, increased internet purchases of properties, of goods and services. And then you start finding the hurdles that have never been addressed by governments, which is, one, internet trade has a very high rejection rate compared to physical purchases. Now, if the logistics of delivery to the point of purchase are not the same as logistics of return, then you have a bureaucratic crisis. Let me give an example. You live in Nairobi. You order online a product from Shanghai. Alibaba gets it shipped to you by a Chinese ship which is calling in the port of Mombasa on its way to deliver some goods in the Caribbean. But from the Caribbean, it does not come back via Mombasa. It goes back via Australia. You look at the product, it's not what you thought you wanted. You want to get your money back. Number one, how do you get a tax refund from the Kenya Revenue Authority, Kenya Customs Authority? Customs authorities are very good at taking money, they're not good at giving back. And number two, by what route and by whose responsibility are you going to arrange the alternative shipping to take this product back to Shanghai? So there is a nightmare that a critical component of e-commerce resides outside the ICT industry. Trade logistics, transport logistics, state governance, which is a major step that I want to talk about. The industry has moved much faster than regulators and enablers. Many times governments will play as ICT into a ministry for ICT. And for them, basically, it means efficient management of rents on telecom services, first and foremost. Other things are secondary. But what it means is there is no institutional coherence between the ministry responsible for ICT, the ministry responsible for transport, and sectoral ministries. For those of us who want to see at ICT's potential for development, not just for how it can grow, the absence of policy synergies between sectoral ministries and the ministries responsible for growing the talent, the entrepreneurship, the technology of ICT poses a major challenge. In the global declarations of 25th September 2015, the Global Development Goals in New York, ICT was seen as a driver on a number of things. One, to enhance gender inclusion, SDG 5. Two, as an aid to roll back extreme poverty, Sustainable Development Goal number 9. And three, as an enabler, a gateway to all the implementational issues, Sustainable Development Goal number 17. This assumption is based on the understanding of how important ICT is. But then also, it's based on a false assumption that regulators also appreciate. Outside industry players also appreciate the potential. of what ICT is going to play. One of the big challenges of public governance today is getting governments to see the enabler role that ICT is going to play in realizing the commitments I've made about banishing extreme poverty and other forms of inclusion. The industry, in spite of these institutional challenges, is playing some important, making important gains. One, there are bold efforts that are underway. One good example is the rollout by a large group of major international players for digital inclusion, Internet for All, it is called the Internet for All initiative, which is basically an attempt to roll out broadband, fixed broadband from Mombasa to the border of DRC Congo. This is already underway. Resources have been placed together, mostly by major players, Google, Apple, and others coming together. And we're just seeing a sum up of what has been achieved so far last week and learning lessons from this. How can we scale it up that Internet for All becomes a reality in other areas? My second area of interest is, I mentioned that in many places, the industry is growing much faster than the capacity of the regulator. When we look at the most successful example of innovative use of ICT in Eastern Africa, in Africa, we always look at M-Pesa in Kenya. I was Minister of Government when M-Pesa emerged as a phenomenon. And we always remember that there was an extremely rare phenomenon that happened in Kenyan governance. Across the world, including in the developed world, regulators do not authorize things they don't understand. If I don't know it, it can't be right. If I understand it, I can consider authorizing it. You had a situation where the central bank and the communications regulator in Kenya, without quite clearly understanding the implications of creating mobile money, had the guts to say, we don't know it, but it might be good, give it a try. That's very, very rare in the normal world. In fact, when I was discussing mobile money as an enabler, as a tool for ease of commerce, central bankers from much of Africa were saying, you go and look at what's happening in Kenya. Money is now outside the control of the central bank. Even commercial banks are scrambling to have a piece of the cake. What was the goal? Was the goal to keep banks happy or to deliver a service on financial inclusion? So if you are a banker, of course, you assume that there is no contradiction between keeping bankers happy and giving a service. But if you are asked, how do you explain that financial inclusion has moved from 12% to 84%? Then you have problems justifying your earlier positions. But still, unfortunately, to open up the potential of mobile money in the developing world, decisions are going to be made by bankers and regulators of banks. Where they will get the political courage to do it, most likely will depend on how well they see the phenomenon that's happening in parts of the world, like East Africa. I was just made aware of a very interesting initiative that's underway. A Silicon Valley NGO, well, in that part of the world, they call them tech startup. Working together with M-Pesa, is launching the world's first, their name is something like Give Directly. They are launching one of the first experiment in the world to test universal basic income by transferring money to all people known for a certain age, a certain income, directly as a kind of welfare spending. Which is very interesting because many states, in the name of social inclusion, spend a lot of money officially targeting the poor, but in net terms they actually target middlemen. Coming out of this country, I know one phenomenon. Most agricultural labor is women, rural women. By the accounts, for example, a woman is stealing tea on the farm. Every day she wakes up, leaves the baby at home, she goes to pick tea leaves and delivers to the factory. But the account holder at the factory is her husband. So the worker is the woman, the pay collector is the man. It's up to you to guess whether he will pass on the money to the woman. Now, what has mobile money meant? Is a woman is delivering milk to a creamery, the account is hers, and payment is made to her mobile phone. You don't know the liberative force of freeing a woman's income from a man. Now, these are some of the potential success stories of what this revolution can do to rural livelihoods. But then you have a problem. The largest problem, I think, in the short term is the following. The persons in our societies who discover, embrace, and are driven by passion about the ICT revolution are younger men and women in urban areas with good internet. They look for the market of their services and their innovativeness within their environment and the global environment. They do not look for the services and backup in areas without internet. There is no intermediary between them and the potential user of ICT services outside the ICT industry. So the potential of impacting dramatically rural livelihoods, non-ICT services sectors, improving access to market intelligence, reducing the distance and the cost of transactions at farm gate for agricultural producers is lost because that old woman does not share any narrative with IHAB in Nairobi. The intermediaries are not there. So one of the challenges is in the face of governments which have phenomenal budgetary outlays for agriculture, for health, for education, but have no conscious sense of how ICT can be an enabler for realizing the goals for which they have those budgets. Route the money for agriculture to basically subsidy programs that work for the agricultural rich, and nothing to do with fundamentally changing the input-output markets for the smallholder agriculturalists, who is the target of rolling back poverty. I want to touch on a matter which, of course, is more front center and most prominent today, about how do we understand the potential of the fourth industrial revolution to impact on development.
So we're an international advocacy campaign organization, and about 2 million of our members are across Africa. So more than about a third of our members are across Africa. And we're working to end extreme poverty and preventable disease, particularly in Africa. We use policy. A lot of research goes into what we present. We motivate public pressure by using our members and popular culture to run creative campaigns with celebrities. As you know, we were co-founded by Bono. And our popular culture and public pressure enables politics to be used to change policy. And we work as a non-partisan organization. Some of the campaigns we've run, last year we ran a campaign called Poverty is Sexist. Some of the speakers, the head of UNCTAD had talked about women having access to finance here in Kenya. So Poverty is Sexist is a campaign which we've run, which has highlighted the challenges women face around the world, not just in Africa. We've run another campaign called the Coconut Chocolate. This was run to promote agriculture in Africa. Agriculture is one of the biggest levers to eradicate poverty. We've also been running a campaign called, the $1 trillion scandal. This is fighting corruption. We've seen that $1 trillion every year is illegally taken out of developing countries. In Nigeria alone, more than $400 billion has left the country between 1960 and 2012, which could have resulted in, amongst other things, retrovirals for a lot of people, almost 500,000 extra primary school teachers, 168 bed nets to prevent malaria, And we're looking at putting great pressure on this. Some of you will have seen some of the remarks made last week by some political leaders on this issue after we had had our anti-corruption meeting in Nigeria the week before. So we're really hoping to move the dial on this. And as the Honorable Cabinet Secretary has talked about openness, we've managed to get many countries to sign up to the Open Government Partnership. And data is going to be one of the key factors in this, as we'll talk about later. I want to tell you a little bit about this girl called Eva. Some of you may have heard of Eva. She's a 14-year-old girl living in a village in Tanzania called Mazninga in the Ringa district. And she wrote a letter to all our members in which she talked about the challenges she was facing. Sorry, we're having real difficulty with the technology here.
Wanasisitiza tusome kwa bidii ili tusome ili baadaye tuje tupate tuishi kwa furaha na amani.
Nitarajia kwamba Eva awe na uwezo. Hawatuthamini, tunavyoeleza matatizo yetu, lakini hawawezi kututhamini. Mimi ni msichana mmoja, sauti yangu ni ya muhimu sana.
So this 14-year-old girl from a small village in Tanzania wrote to our one members across the world, and she said she's a young girl. Life has gotten better for her. She's managed to attain primary school, and she's going to be 15. Last year she was 15. And she hoped to go to secondary school, which she's now managed to do. But although the basics are better, she still faces many challenges. She has to walk, there's no clean water where she lives. There used to be, but the water level has dropped dramatically. So every day she walks 5 times, 1 kilometer away to fetch water from the river. This, as you can imagine, takes up a lot of her school day. She doesn't have enough food to eat, so she's hungry in class. And she considers herself one of the lucky ones because not everybody in her village can go to primary school and now secondary school. And she's at an age where she's now 16 this year, where many girls in her village get married off. The parents prioritize the male child. So she wrote to our one members, and then she wrote to President Obama. And at the United Nations General Assembly, President Obama read her letter out to all world leaders and the globe, saying he wanted to make the world a better place so that girls like Eva in a village in Tanzania could really be part of a global community in which people had equal access to education and opportunities. There's no reason why somebody like Eva in a small village in Tanzania shouldn't be the next creator of a platform that will change the world. We will never know the ability of people who are cut off from opportunity unless we give them a chance. And that's what we want to talk about here. So there's Eva taking a selfie, probably the first time she had used a camera like that. So she's got a mobile network in her village, but it doesn't have internet connectivity. It's a very weak network. It's still 2G. In 2016, a 2G network. She can't afford, even if she were to have a feature phone, to pay for mobile access. And she's competing against, as somebody was saying earlier, a 2-year-old in Canada who's learning to code. Will this be an equitable world if we continue like this? Eva's ambition is she wants to be a policewoman so that she can change the lives of the people in her community. And in order to do that, she needs to finish secondary school. Will she be able to finish secondary school? When she's walking 10 kilometers a day fetching water. and that water is not good. She doesn't have enough food to eat. But she's doing her best. She's saying she can make a difference. And she asked us to talk to you about the challenges she's facing. These are global challenges. So she was born in 2000. When she was 15, the span of the Millennium Development Goals had expired. When she's 30, the SDGs span will have expired. She wants to end extreme poverty. So what's happened in Tanzania since 2000? The debts have been dropped, aid has been doubled, the GDP has quadrupled. Primary school enrollment is up by 57%, child mortality is down, and immunization coverage has increased dramatically. So there has been some progress, but there needs to be dramatic progress. There's a poverty of data on the health statistics. In Tanzania, like many other countries, 1/3 of births are not registered. 1/3 of deaths are not registered. There are challenges with the data on poverty. How many people really live under $1.90 a day? The stats in many countries across Africa and other countries is very out of date. Very, very out of date. In some cases, 5 years and more. How they're getting on there, on budgeting, and if government revenue has been received, what's been done with it. This is his office. It's got a peeling poster which has flopped down on which he records how they're doing. There's a poverty of data in this country and in many others across the world. How can we for disruption? We can change the world here. With access to data, we can ensure that if we get local level data and collate it upwards to national level, we can truly see how these countries from the village level are tracking the SDGs. And that's the challenge we're throwing out here today. We've talked about how poverty is sexist, and we've talked about how it's impacting women. And we all know that when we invest in women, we make tremendous impact. But if we don't even have the stats to show what we're doing and how it's progressing, then we have a big problem here. What we want to do is to help Eva to hold local and national government accountable with data. When my colleague Jamie was in her village, he went to her school, and the teacher was extremely enthusiastic. He said, if we had the gadgets and the access, our children would be able to gather data here. I'd set it for them as a project so that you would know at village level what's happening. Are schools being built? Is there clean water? What's happening on livelihoods? So we want to give Eva and her, people like her, millions of people like her around the world, the ability to hold local and national government accountable. And this is a good thing. In many cases, government don't have the ability to have local level data at the granular level, at village level. We want to develop an interface with new global goals for Eva and her cohort to help improve local service delivery and fill in gaps in feedback loops. It's really encouraging to hear what the Cabinet Secretary has said, that here in Kenya, they're laying out broadband into the villages, into the county headquarters, so that people can really have access, be part of the global community, and we can make real progress on the SDGs and be able to measure it in real time now. There's a need for disruption. I'm sure I can count on your expertise and enthusiasm with your innovations and partnering with groups who have real local social capital to share and socialize solutions. Some of the questions we want to consider this week. We've got great talent from around the world here, 70 countries plus. What innovations are you working on that could empower Eva and people like her? What's missing in the ICT ecosystem to reach and empower her? And how can we together collaborate as one to ensure that Eva's generation are made the true client for the new global goals for sustainable development? These are big questions. Everybody's working on some projects here and there that are related to these, but if we can collate these together and have a cohesive run, I think we can really make some progress on these and have tools to development. So we put together a little timeline. We'd hope to have something to show in July at Dar at the Mobile 360 conference. We hope to be able to share developments at the UN General Assembly in September. Wouldn't it be amazing to go back to that General Assembly and say, we heard Eva's cry last year, President Obama read out her letter, and we as the ICT4D community are doing something about this so that we can track progress on the SDGs around the world. And then hopefully take it back to the mobile community next year at Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress. I hope I can count on your enthusiasm and support. We're here all week, and we look forward to partnering with you to work together as one. Thank you.